Jack, audio check. Testing, testing, testing.
I hear you.
Cool. How you been?
I just got back from Hawaii and I expect full-blown jet lag shortly.
Well, so far it seems to be half blown.
Well, the fact that I woke up at 6:30 this morning was a good sign. So
Jack, I don't know if you've met Glenn. Glenn, I don't know if you've met Jack. Jack is I think, a long past participant, but also then has returned now in the last few months. Glenn was a very regular participant until what, 2, 3 years ago. And so I don't know if you guys have met each other, but let's see what happens here.
Hey, good to be here
Jack
again.
and I used to be
Yeah.
office mates in Bay Area, loosely.
Ah, okay. I think I've seen your name before, and maybe I've seen one of the calls or something, but I haven't been very active in the last few years on these video calls. But it's good to be back again.
and where are you at right now?
Uh, I'm in Norway,
Ah,
so I live on a little peninsula outside of Oslo.
got it.
With my girlfriend Lindis here, and yeah, so we had a bit of a national celebration day yesterday, so therefore but we just went for a good walk in the forest here because it's some really beautiful areas
Oh yeah.
around here.
Yes.
So I heard you guys had a conversation yesterday. I think someone said it was a good conversation.
3 hours.
Okay, yeah. I haven't had much time, you see, in the weekends to participate, but I do have the occasion to listen to things when I'm at work. So I did listen to this longer conversation earlier, and also a lot of things in there.
I appreciate that, Glenn. And yes, I think we did have a conversation yesterday. I'm going to try and save my voice today. I have something in my throat today, so I might be a little bit rough around the edges. Stacy, Barry, you guys want to recap what might have happened yesterday?
I'll let Stacy recap. She was more into it than I was.
Well, first, hi, Glenn. Good to see you again. And welcome back, Jack. I hope you had a great vacation. Yesterday, we continued a conversation that Kayla had started by bringing up the issue of women feeling safe on a different call. I was not on that call, but I did listen to the recording where one of the men on the call responded in a way that many of us had an issue with, and Sam and him wound up getting in a very heated argument. um, was not productive, but it did express how people were feeling, and it brought out a lot of issues. So yesterday was a continuation of that call where Kayla, myself, and Sam's friend Gail came, Sam's girlfriend Gail came to the call, and Barry and Sam and Eric, who were the other men on the call, we were 50-50, which is unusual. They really sat back and gave us the space to talk about our perception of things. So from there, we moved on to not just the safety issue of how women feel, but other things. And I think at the end, at least among the women, and I think Sam too, and Barry didn't really comment, but I think that we had some sort of consensus that we would need to learn how to heal the little boy if we wanted to heal society as a whole. Like that would be the place to start. So I don't know. Sam, did I leave out anything that you thought was really relevant?
Well, we went into a bunch of things. There were definitely 3 hours worth of material. But before I comment, I'd like to give Barry a chance to add to the details.
I just tend to zoom out a bit. I would say beyond healing the little boy, healing the culture itself. The culture is very, very sick. And that's one of the reasons that members of the culture become sick. We have a toxic culture. We have to heal the culture, not just the victim of the culture, but the culture itself.
So I do want to make one small addendum, and that is, yes, I think everybody watched the video. We know the person in question is Josh. That's a matter of public record, so I don't think it's necessary to refer to him in the third person. But also, when Stacy says we need to heal the small boy or a little boy, I do think that she was talking about society in general, how we raise young boys
Yes.
and what they're taught, what they're seeing, what's acceptable. So that reference to young boy was not to anybody that she was talking about prior. Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So I had many thoughts, and I'll just give two or three of them right now because there's plenty of material. And then I'd like to hear what Glenn has to say. And Jack, if you had, any part of that video impinged on you at all, then I'd like to hear what you'd like to say as well, or even any of this introduction that the rest of us are giving. What was interesting to me is I wish each of the rest of you yesterday would have had this opportunity. Is that after the call yesterday, Gail and I ended up debriefing for hey Josh, Gail and I ended up debriefing for at least 4 or 5 hours after the call yesterday. So we went into more of the implications, what was meant, what wasn't said, what we could have done better. So that was fairly interesting experience to have ended a 3 hour session yesterday and then also had probably 4 or 5 hours of subsequent debrief. And a lot came out in that as well. And one other comment before I drop off. The conversation we had yesterday is a clear example to me of what AI cannot do today. There were humans with human experiences, with interactions and misinterpretations, deep feelings, possible triggers, recommendations for future action and future thought. To date, to my knowledge, no AI is capable of going into those kinds of contributions today. I have much more to say on that. Let's acknowledge Josh is here, and Glenn, you're welcome to have the floor, and Jack too, if you like.
Great. I can say a little bit. Well, for the last few years, I haven't really participated in many calls at all, hardly any, and also not really participated very much on social media. I've kind of had this thought that I would return, not so long, but it's sort of taken some time, and some things have happened in my life. I mean, both my parents have passed away, and I also had a full-time job. So in the weekends, it's been a lot of things happening in the weekends. I mean, I'm also quite active with this group, working in meditation group with the Gurdjieff tradition, and that's also something I often do. But I have been following Facebook mostly, but other things as well. Following a lot on on YouTube. Been very much interested in the large language models in the last few years, and been speaking a lot with them. And I also really resonate with this, that there are certain things that they just can't do, and what Sam mentioned here seemed like a great example of that. And then there's also some real magic that seems to be possible to happen now, if we can interact with these things well, but possibly even more important, how we interact with one another. And so this goes to this, healing the culture. So one of the reasons why I haven't really been participating so much in social media and in the sort of public conversation for a while is, I guess I've kind of been observing it from a distance more, and reflecting deeply on many ideas that I've been working on a long time. And it's this general feeling that there's some kind of a collective insanity, and that it has its roots very long back in time, possibly thousands of years back in time, and that everyone today has kind of been thrown into it. But at the same time, that it seems to have developed in a very peculiar way, especially in the last years and the last decades. And that seems to be connected to this great change that I've seen happen. The really biggest change is just how much people are interacting with these machines, small machines that transmit information patterns, and just how these machines have also become more advanced, and now we're able to have a conversation with somehow the patterns themselves in a way, and then how the public conversation's been happening together with that. And here, this sense of a madness is some kind of a mimetic madness, or at least that's a way it could be seen. It could be seen with an emphasis on the patterns themselves, patterns of thinking, patterns of behaving, and also patterns of identity. And so when I listened to this conversation that you just referred to, it was a lot there when I heard the whole thing, and I can't go to all of it, but one of the things that I had reacted to, which was why I came this comment, was probably a little frivolous, but at the same time it did initiate something. And the thing that I really reacted to here is something that I've seen a lot, and it has something to do with identity and a way of using language that assigns identity to other human beings based on some kind of stereotype sometimes, or some kind of feature, or some element where that act of categorization of another human being seems to me to be a very large mega pattern that's been going through all of human culture for a very, very long time. And it seems to be connected to oppression of certain groups because it is used to group identities, but also identities of people who are supposed to be responsible, like politicians, that they have also been given certain identities, which is almost like a kind of a reality show or some kind of a theater. It's extremely strange, and the political discourse in general, it just feels to me so astonishingly insane and ridiculous. And just gone so far into utter absurdity that it from a certain point of view it's hard to even take it seriously. While at the same time, of course, this is real stuff that influences real lives. So this is kind of the turmoil that I see here. Um, and it seems to be something that goes really deep. Um, it has it is like a kind of a complex where the question, what does it mean to be a human, is a very big question. What is the human identity? Like, who am I in this world? These kind of questions have a connection to the information structures themselves and the patterns of information transmissions and memes and the computers and social media and this entertainment cycle, and all of this also influences how we see ourselves, how we see other people. And this is sort of where it feels to me like the gist of this special kind of insanity is. And at the same time, possibly the hope of getting free from it. Because if we could understand how we use these information structures, how they use us, how we interact with the computers, with the AI, with the language, with the concepts, the ideas, if we could become more conscious of this and kind of reinvigorate this from the inside, reinvent it from the inside, then that seems to be a possible path where there's hope to escape this kind of insanity, and it would need to be a very different way of thinking, a different way of communicating, speaking, and framing questions very differently, and a very different way of seeing what a human being is, basically. That feels very at the heart of this. So yeah, I'll just leave it there for now.
So Glenn, I think you said a lot, and I have to confess, I'm not sure I followed all of it. So I think I'm going to need a translator. There was quite a bit there. Josh, I see your hand is up, but Jack, do you have anything to add? Since I had mentioned you first, and then we can have Josh take the floor.
Well, let's let Josh go first. It's okay.
Okay.
If you need to say something, Jack, please go ahead. I just
No. You did. I have a few thoughts, but I wanted to hear what you'd say.
yeah, I just want to say hi to Glenn because I haven't talked to you in so long. And when you said I need a translator, Sam, I was coming to be the translator because I followed all of that, every word. It was clear as a bell to me, and it was also catching up with Glenn after 2 years of the conversation. So I think he was explaining where he was going, what he's been doing, where he is now, and where he sees it going. So I caught the whole thing. So thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate that. And I think that there is so much to discuss that it's not something that you can do in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or even an hour and a half if he was to talk for an hour and a half. So I appreciate you condensing 2.5 years into 15 minutes. And there is a lot going on, a lot of things that we can label, but I don't think that will tell us what it is. It will say how we can pretend to understand what the zeitgeist is at the moment, what the public sentiment is, what the morality, what the social constructs are. And as I think all of us that came to GCC in the beginning was to be a systems thinker, to create a system that works for hopefully everybody. I think that's the sentiment that I've gotten from everyone that's ever come into the space is we're trying to do our best to make some system that either resonates with everyone, is possible to work with everyone. It doesn't have to, but if it does work with everyone, that would be wonderful. But a system that at least everyone can grok and understand. And thank you, Sam, for that word grok, because that was a word that I didn't have in my vocabulary before I met you. I knew of it. I did not use it. I thought it was for nerds and people that read science fiction, but it seems to be in the zeitgeist now. So thank you, Sam, for putting it in my vocabulary. And with that, I'm complete.
Before you relinquish the floor, I'm just curious to see if you had any thoughts on last Saturday's conversation and our extended epilogue between you and me, and or whether you've actually watched it and done any kind of review of it, and um, whether or not you've watched either last Saturday, sorry, last Sunday as well. Just real quick, I'd just like to get that sense of whether that happened.
No, I haven't watched last Sunday, and I did not review back the conversation we had, but I was there for it in real time. And the only thing I had to say was I'm apologizing to Barry because I saw Barry get upset, and I got extremely upset. And I appreciate you spending some time talking afterwards for an hour because I'm still upset over it. So I don't want to rehash it. I think it's been documented, it's clear, but I'm upset that we can't communicate in a way that is not arguing. And I take responsibility for me standing up. I was very clear for an hour saying why I did what I did. And I'd like to do it in a way that you can hear me and not, hey, 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 why are you yelling at me, telling me it's this way, and vice versa. I don't want to yell. So with that, I'm complete.
And so you came to apologize to Barry and reassert the fact that you were defending your position that being called a white man is inappropriate?
Uh, Are you trying to catch me in something, Sam? I don't understand what your line of
Yes,
questioning is
yes,
there.
I am.
Go
Yes, I
ahead,
am. And
catch
I'll
me in
admit to it.
something.
Okay.
Go for it. Go
Because
for it.
specifically, I did not hear an apology to Kayla.
Is she here right now?
No.
Why would I apologize to her right now?
Okay, that's an interesting perspective also.
I can give her a call on the telephone if she wants an apology. I'll call her personally.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Stacy's got her hand up.
Wait, no, no, real quick. If you're trying to catch me in something, why don't you communicate to me something very human? Did Kayla say she wanted an apology in one of the conversations that I didn't watch?
You evidently did not get the sense that she got very upset.
I'm going to ask you a very clear question, Sam. Did Kayla say in one of the conversations last Sunday or yesterday that she would like an apology from me?
Not specifically, not in those words, no.
Okay, thank you.
So
Stacy?
yeah, I may have to leave early today, so I just want to I have a question that I want to put on the record because most of you know I don't like when somebody assumes somebody's action. So Josh, I have a clear question for you because different people said different things. So my question to you is, were you really crying or were you pretending to cry to mock Kayla?
No, I'm really upset and was really about to cry. I couldn't even drive. I had to pull over my car and I couldn't find a spot that wasn't in the sun. And I was trying to pull over my car to find a spot that was not in the sun.
Thank you for answering that. And
Yeah,
maybe I do think that
I was really upset.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
I'm not gonna at some point, I don't know if today's the day because it feels like it's taking on a little bit of a different flavor with Glenn and but at some point we need to continue the conversation that we had yesterday when you weren't here. And hopefully by then other people on today's call can watch yesterday's session because only Barry and Sam and myself were in that one.
Right.
Yeah, if someone wants to give me a catch up, because I feel like that's sort of the elephant in the room. I don't know what the conversation was yesterday. I was not here. So that would be wonderful.
I put a note in the chat that I'm always looking for better practices than the practices which we're employing when they're not achieving the goal. And one of the things that I learned from Dr. Evan way back in the 1980s, I guess it was, is how to express displeasure at something that's going on. And he proposed to use the phrase, I take exception to something. And being able to say, I take exception to, as opposed to emoting the displeasure, is a step up in terms of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. And I struggle myself to remind myself to say, I take exception to, and then name the thing that just happened. That's just a piece of it's just a piece of information about me that other people can employ or ignore as they see fit.
Jack, you graciously let Josh go first, but you had some thoughts. I was thinking that was probably a good time.
So Glenn was talking about people and the little machines, and he held up a cell phone. It reminded me of something I observed um, in Hawaii last week. Kids walking along a walkway at a Hilton on the beach with people swimming with porpoises on the left side and the ocean and a giant Buddha on the right side, and they're busy staring at their cell phones while they're walking. They're not even looking around. I think that Glenn nailed it. We we are losing our ability to appreciate what's going on around us. Over.
Can I add a little something here?
Go ahead, Glenn.
I forgot to mention this, but I think that, yeah, the consequence of this dynamic, which seems to be that humans have become very addicted to these machines and to certain patterns and certain mimetic dynamics. Then there's the disconnection from nature and from real connection with people and to the things that can't be so easily expressed through the information structures. So I guess the question I would have then is it possible for us to have a more healthy way to relate to these machines? Because I have a hard time seeing that we will get rid of them. The same goes not least for the AI models. Is there a way we could consciously interact and relate to all of this and one another, where we can really maybe even increase the human capacities and the unique human skills and the ability to see one another, listen, and grok, the essence of human experience with these machines actually doing their thing really well. And that seems like an unanswered question, but I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be ways of doing this. And I'll obviously have a lot of ideas in that direction as well. So yeah, just throwing that in.
Okay, I'll go. Glenn, I hear you mention identity politics. I'm interpreting, possibly incorrectly, that is in reference to the phrase white man. And so I'm wondering whether or not that was intentional or whether that was a misinterpretation on my part.
Oh, okay, I'll clear it up. The way I see it, it is a massive massive phenomena that goes to identity on all levels for humans, and race and gender identity is one of them. But there's also ideological identities and identities related to specific groups and so on. But I think my main point here was that the way these identities seem to have been formed in the political discourse in general, especially, I would say it is a very deeply dehumanizing flavor, so to say, to all the identities in that realm. And this would be one example of something that has become politicized and become part of this mimetic thing, which is the current political, I don't even know what to call it, but it's like this complete madness. And yeah, it seems to give humans generally just really sad identities somehow that doesn't honor who we really are, and especially doesn't honor our potential.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Stacy, and then I'll go.
Thank you. To go back to what was said about labels, I want to say I don't think the problem is with labels. I think the problem is with labeling incorrectly. And maybe the current language that we have isn't enough to ensure that items, or whatever you want to call them, are labeled correctly. So there is no issue for me being called a white woman as long as there's no attachment to the word white or the word woman, which for me, there isn't. The other thing, to go to Glenn's point about how we can, is there a way that we'll be able to work with AI in a healthier way? What I want to say is if we don't solve the problem that we discussed earlier, which is an imbalance between masculine and feminine energy, I do not see a possibility to be able to create machines that don't also lack that same balance. And it's that imbalance that leads to abuses of power and things like that. Over.
Thank you, Stacy. I think that's a very important point. Let's make sure we follow up on that. My point around labels and names and categories is that language is useful, and all language needs references. References can come in terms of symbols, names, labels, phrases, categories, attributes, name it, whatever it is. It's meant to provide some specificity so that the audience or the program, if it's a software, can know what that label is referring to. Now, subsequently, once you've identified that thing or, object or entity, then you can say something about it, or you can attribute a characteristic to it, or you can operate on it, or you can actually, do some other kind of operation, knowing that you've got this symbol that represents an entity. Okay. So there's the recognition aspect, which is the first part, which is let's figure out what we're talking about. And then the second part is what do you want to do with it now that you've identified it? Now, when Kayla was using that phrase last Saturday, I didn't take any reference of white man to be pejorative in any case, any possible way. She was referring to Barry and Josh with no malice, no ill will, just a matter of reference. Because we can talk about degreed men, we can talk about clothed men, we can talk about businessmen, we can talk about, carpentry men, we can talk about all of that. None of that elicits the kind of emotional trigger, but they're all useful in terms of providing a reference to something that you can then talk about. In the case of white man, for Josh, that had some trigger capacity to it. That's worth looking into. But I repeat, Kayla had no malice. She had no ill will. She was just curious about the backgrounds and opinions and experience of Josh and Barry, who represented, a population that she didn't identify with. And she wanted to get that perspective into the conversation. She could have subsequently also said, let's get the perspective of Asian men, in which case I would have responded. She could have said, let's get the perspective of paraplegic men, in which case, somebody else would have responded. Okay. So she was eliciting perspectives, but that conversation was not possible until yesterday, I think, or was it Sunday? Yeah, because Josh did take offense at the phrase white man, even though it was met with no ill will. And vehemently asserted that that was inappropriate, even though Kayla said, okay, fine, I didn't mean anything by that. Let me ask a question. She tried to just pass over that reference, but that was not possible because Josh didn't acknowledge that or wanted to make a bigger point about not being called a white man. So the origins of why a white man was taken as a pejorative term by Josh is interesting to me. We make references to black men all the time. We make references to Asian men. We make references to, African men. There are many such references. And I'll repeat something else that I did say one-on-one to Josh, which is what comes out of my mouth is a reflection of what's inside me, what I believe, what my experiences, everything else. What comes out of Kayla's mouth is a reflection of her. What comes out of Josh's mouth is a reflection of Josh. So what I say doesn't have any inherent truth about anything else other than revealing my inner workings. Same thing with what comes out of Josh's mouth. It reveals Josh's inner workings, but not is necessarily assumed to be true about any other entity. That's worth following up on. So those are the aspects I find interesting. That Kayla was not given an opportunity to speak, and that iterated many times, Josh felt it was more important to say he was offended by being called a white man than it was important for Kayla to be given the chance to speak. And he repeated that multiple times. So I am very clear on that point in my one-on-one with Josh. Over. Josh, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just trying to figure out a way that I can phrase this so I'm heard by you, Sam. So I just heard you say something which is my words don't reflect what Kayla thinks or says, but then you proceeded to tell us earlier what she meant and how she was thinking about what she said and what her intentions were, and there was no malice or ill will.
She
Yeah,
So the
shared that
question,
because,
wait,
yesterday.
wait, I'm not done. I'm not done.
I'm
I'll
just
let you
saying,
speak.
I'm just saying it was shared
Oh,
yesterday.
wait, I feel attacked. I'm being attacked. I'm not getting to speak. Oh, let me
Josh,
yell and
cut
be
that
angry.
out. You're
Come
being a
on,
child
guys.
now, Josh.
No, no,
Oh,
I was making a point.
Just address the issue.
I just got cut off. I was in the middle of speaking. Can I finish without being cut off?
Okay, I'll take myself out of the conversation because we're not being adults here.
Damn. Am I able to speak without being cut off? I'm asking you a question. If I speak, will you be cutting me off?
Go ahead.
I don't feel safe when I'm talking with you. I'm being completely honest. I'm being very forthright. When I'm speaking, I just got cut off. I don't want that to happen. Is
Now
it
you can
possible?
imagine how Kalo felt.
Now I'm going to proceed to tell you, Sam, without being cut off by you, why I cut her off and why I didn't want her to proceed. Because if her intention was what you say, no ill will or no malice, and there's four people in a room, one is Sam, one is Kayla, one is Barry, one is me. Why would she ask, let's ask the white men what they think? Why wouldn't she say, let's ask Barry and Josh what they think? And with that, I'm complete.
All right. Am I not audible, Barry?
Oh, okay.
No.
I tend to process things long after the event. And one of the things that came to mind was a joke. And often when things get a little dicey, I look to the role of humor or levity in helping to resolve the situation. And I recalled the very first joke I ever heard that involved the phrase "white man," and it was a very funny one. It was a long time ago. It came from a joke about the Lone Ranger, the Western series, The Lone Ranger. And the Lone Ranger and Tonto, his sidekick, are in a difficult situation. And the Lone Ranger says, "Oh dear, we're surrounded by Indians." And Tonto says, "What you mean we, white man?"
Okay, so thanks, Barry. But I heard Josh ask a question, which I think I'll now attempt to answer, which is why not say, let's ask Barry, why not let's ask Josh? Okay. In conversation, there's a typical use of shorthand. Okay. Just like LOL is the shorthand for, hey, we're laughing. Okay. So it was a shorter way, a shortcut to refer to Josh and Barry. And I will repeat again, which had no ill will or malice. And people knew exactly who she meant. It was Barry and Josh. So that's still not something I find offensive over.
Can I ask you a
Yeah.
question? Why are you saying it had no ill will?
Because Kayla had no ill will. I didn't take it that way. Stacy, I believe, mentioned it yesterday. She reiterated that she had no ill will. It is curious to me that you think there was a possibility that it carried ill will in that phrase.
Thank you for explaining. And do you understand why I took offense to it?
I do understand, but I think it could have been done by asserting that point after Kayla spoke, but you didn't want to let her speak. You asserted that point, it eliminated the possibility that she could speak. And that's why I intervened.
Do you know why I did that?
You have told me many times that it was because you didn't want to be referred to as a white man. That you've used the word you don't see color, and you don't think it's appropriate to refer to people by the color of their skin.
You see, again,
And
you're
you've said
putting
that.
words in my mouth. I didn't say that, by the way. I didn't say I didn't see
Let's
color.
go back to the conversation. Let's go back to the conversation.
No, no, wait, stop, Sam, stop. The thing that you're doing is the same reason I stopped her at that moment in time, and I'm going to stop you at this moment in time. Don't put words in other people's mouths.
Okay,
Don't
I would
tell,
have to.
don't tell people on the
So you
record
interrupted
that are
me
in a
again.
record. I did, and I'll keep interrupting you because I will not allow you to go on a record and say what I said. So, in other words, if I said to you right now, Sam says that everyone in here is a piece of shit, you would not let me go forward with that. Now, that's an extreme case.
I absolutely
But if
would.
I put words in
I
your mouth,
absolutely would.
you would?
Yes, absolutely. Because then, if nobody could find evidence to that effect, then it would reveal something about you, Josh, not about me.
Oh, okay. That's the game you're playing.
It's not a game.
So, why did you say that I said that I don't see color? Is that
Okay.
what you heard me
To the
say, or is
best
that
I
what you think I
recall,
said? To the best you
you
recall. Got
said
it.
something like, what just happened? Something just happened.
I think you're playing a game where you record conversations for 5 years and you think you're playing a game. It's not a fun game, Sam. I don't want to play this game with you. I'm
You
going
don't
to be
have to
on the
play. It's
record
not a
right
game,
here.
Josh.
Good, then stop doing it. If you want to be a good listener and really listen to what's in someone's heart, do that with sincerity, honesty, and respect. But don't play a game, Sam.
Josh, the game word is yours. I am not
Really, I've
using
been on
that
conversations with you
frivolous.
for 5 years and watched you do this with other people. And I sat back and said nothing. But I'm not going to sit back and say
See,
nothing anymore.
again, Josh, whatever point was being made, you have derailed because you take offense. You don't let other people give their say
Oh
simply
look,
because you
I just
choose to
called
take
you out for
offense.
I just called you out for saying a game, but you didn't do what you just said you were going to do, which is I'd say nothing and let you say that. You see how you're a hypocrite, Sam? I just caught you in your own lie.
So it's assigning negative attentions to other people. Is that the
Yeah.
issue?
And then pretending as if he didn't do that and he's such a good person. When I just caught you in the same exact thing that you said you wouldn't do. If I said something bad about you, you'd be quiet and say nothing. Look what you just did. I just caught you.
Yeah, I don't. I don't say anything by you telling me that I'm a whatever the phrase was you use. I don't take any offense at that because, like I said, what comes in your mouth is a reflection of you and what's inside you. What comes out of my mouth is a reflection of me and what's inside me. Okay, I get what happened. Jack left. Yeah. Oh no, Jack. Yeah, I think he's gone.
Um, do we know why he left? Did he just disconnect, or
I no, I can't.
there's no nothing?
Yes,
He said
I
he had to
can't
leave
guess.
at 9 o'clock, actually.
Oh, he did. I missed that.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't miss it. There's a lot of things that I feel like I really do love you, Sam, and I do care about you, and I have been in conversations with you for a long time. And I do feel like there's times when you're a great listener, and there's times when you're terrible at it. And I think there's times when I'm a great listener and times when I'm horrible at it. But I think catching people and trying to put someone on the record and you said this, I don't want to do that with you.
I am always on the record, Josh, and I think anybody who's comfortable with what they say should be comfortable just always being on the record. Okay, that's my own opinion. Okay, Stacy has her hand up though.
Yeah. Um, I don't want to put words into anybody's mouth, so I'm going to just say what my perception is and then ask to be corrected just because it's easier for me at this point. So, Josh, when you said that you actually teared up, I'm operating under the assumption that it was over the white man comment and not something else. So, before I go any further, where did the emotion come from if I'm wrong? Like, was it something else? Like, did it come from something else or did it come from just that?
The emotion, what it came from, Stacey, was being attacked when I said I took offense to be calling, let's ask what the white men in the room said. And I got
Okay.
really offended by that. And
Okay.
when I did, they were like, oh, no, 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 we didn't mean that by any chance. No, no, that's not what we were saying.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to confirm that before I made my point, which
Yeah,
said
I felt
earlier.
I got attacked.
Okay, but that's different. Now you're talking about being attacked. I want to take a step
Mm.
back before the being attacked, and I want to just talk about the white man comment. Because as I said earlier, when I was talking about labels, if I had a white couch, or if there were two people, one was a man and one was a woman, there's nothing inherently wrong with the words. So my observation or and combined with my belief is that you have something in your history that attaches you to those words. And that's not for me to probe into, but I'm telling you the way I read it, and I think it's worth looking into. Over.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I would love to share it if someone asked me, hey, man, why are you getting so offended by these words? Like, usually it doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of charge around that. What happened, Josh? Did something happen? I'd love to tell you the story,
Uh,
but
I
no
just
one
want
asked me that.
I just want to say one other thing about the timing of that. The reason that conversation couldn't happen is because we were already dealing with somebody else's pain. And I have to be honest, I felt that you minimized it even before the white man comment came up. When she was sharing her pain, and I said this yesterday, it reminded me of conversations that I had been in with Black and white women where a Black woman is explaining a way in which she was hurt. And the white woman jumped in and said, oh, well, that happened to me too. Or, oh, that's the same thing. That's how I felt when you said, well, I haven't felt safe either. in my opinion, you did not give her the space to release her pain for us to hear her pain. And that was not the time to talk about your pain because we hadn't finished with her. Or I wasn't here, but you guys hadn't finished. I think Glenn wants to say something.
Yeah, I really had that impression as well, that it was kind of a crash that happened where his reaction was very real, was very genuine, but it just crashed with this other moment when Kayla had just shared something and it was hanging in the air. So it was unfortunate in that sense. That doesn't take away that there's something real in both those reactions that deserve to be taken seriously. It's just that sometimes if it all happens at once in a conversation, it's just very, it becomes like a kind of crash, right? And it's that goes to the interruption and disruption that can happen. But another thing, what I picked up when I heard Josh speak now was that he was feeling attacked, and is there this sense of assuming a bad intention? Maybe this, I don't really know, but when I heard it, didn't seem to me like there was any ill intent when she used this expression, white man. That doesn't mean that there's maybe other things, about your conversations for the last few years that are behind why he's feeling attacked. So that's a whole discussion. And maybe it could be good if someone asked Josh about why was it that this particular word did evoke such a reaction, and maybe it shouldn't be underestimated because there is. Okay, let's look at it this way. On the one hand, you have the person here who said it with as far as I can say, no ill intention. It was to open up a question. But then on the other hand, and this goes back to this issue I was talking about earlier, the associations to the word. There's this word that has incredible pain and negative things associated with it, especially in today's time. But then you also have, to what Sam mentioned earlier, yes, we have categories, we have descriptions that we use in language, so we probably can't get away from that, and we need that, reference points, etc. But then I would separate between categorizing things or phenomena and categorizing people. So the act of using a category for a person, it seems vastly more impactful, more serious. And if that category also happens to be contaminated or associated with some really, really painful things, that is something that can definitely, that is something that can really create a strong reaction. And that I don't know if Josh would say that way. I'm just saying how I see it. That there's a huge difference between the kind of categories we use, the kind of role they have, and even if sometimes something is said with a good intention, the word itself can be so associated with negative things that it can feel like an attack. And I'm also hearing, Sam's point that we really should assume no bad faith and try to not take things personally and maybe try to stay a little calm. And, maybe that's the way you have to figure out a way to be a little bit calm when talking about this, because it is a lot of pain associated with it. And, women have felt this more than anyone, right? and all of the identities that's been pushed on women through the years. So it's a very big thing. It seems like a very complicated thing, and if we could, be open and really try to not assume bad intentions and try to be a little calm, and maybe it's possible to maneuver through it. Yeah, just leave it there.
So, Josh, what is it about the term white man that you reacted to very strongly?
I'm just feeling what Glenn said because I think it's, and also what Stacy said earlier, and I'm not into like talking about that at this moment in time more than I'm into feeling what it feels like. Because what Glenn just said, all women have felt these certain feelings, and the oppression of people themselves and who each person is as a soul and their identity as a soul without being labeled. That's what I'd like to lean into. And at some point, if I felt safe with you, which I do not right now, Sam, I'm going to be completely honest. I do not feel safe telling you that story. I would love to tell you that story at another time. If you can remind me, I appreciate it.
So, I appreciate you saying that you feel this for women. Do you not see that when a woman spoke last Saturday, talking specifically about safety, she was immediately shut down? And that was so bleeping ironic and untimely, actually. And that's why my reaction was so strong. It was a woman trying to talk about safety who was immediately made unsafe. And that was a point that I wanted to make. And I don't think I was able to make that point with you until probably at least an hour into our one-on-one. I could be off about the timing. But I kept repeating, Josh, did you see that Kayla was not given a chance to speak? And I don't believe you acknowledged that for the first several times that I brought up that point. I think you eventually did, but not the first several times. Over. Yeah.
Just want to make sure you understand me, Sam. Not only did I get that point and understood it, I was trying to make the point, and I'm not sure if you heard me, is I don't want to label Kayla a woman or a man or have that label. I want to treat her the same way, whether she's a woman or a man. And I want you to understand that that's what I've been trying to do in these conversations for years. And that's who I am as a person. I
Okay.
try to treat people.
I'll get interrupted. That sounds disingenuous to me.
Whoa, I
Okay.
just got interrupted. Wow, I feel really
Yes,
safe.
that sounds disingenuous to me. Stacy?
I just wanted to say, I wanted to suggest that, Josh, you may want to rethink that because I think you have noble intentions between wanting to treat everybody equally, but that discounts everybody's history and their past. And we all have different experiences. So as opposed to treating everyone equally, I would say individually might be a better term. Go ahead, Josh.
Yes, I think you're right. Individually is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I'm not communicating properly. Am I not being heard that I want to treat people who they are, not because of their gender or because of their color?
But I just want to make the distinction between equal and unique.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Individual, I understand. Equal and
Equal,
unique.
equal, equal sounds like all the same. That's what equal, when people hear equal, they think of everything exactly the same in all dimensions. And that is not how human beings are. We're all slightly different That's the beauty of it. So while we have unique differences, there are certain things that we share, and those we might take the shorthand and, sometimes try to categorize like survivors of domestic abuse or war veterans. Those are categories that, even though all the people in that category are not exactly the same, they're not equal. They came there with different experiences and different makeup to start with. We could still at least shed some light on some common experiences that they've had, but their reactions are not going to be the same. They're not going to be equal because there's different experiences that get put into that equation that adds up to how a person responds and perceives. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. So the word equal is very triggering as opposed to the word individual, because to me, I thought they were equal, individual and equal. I think everyone should be treated as an individual and equally for who they are, not for what they're represented by an outer experience, but the inner experience of who they are and what they represent and how they carry themselves in terms of who they are in here, not out here externally, but spiritually inside. I might have been brought up different than most people, and that might not be the way most people think. And I might get attacked because of that. And I have a lot in my life. And I feel like I'm being attacked here because of that, but I'm still going to stay true to that belief because that's my inner belief. And that's how if you ask anyone that knows me, that's how I like to live my life. And people that don't like to live their life like that, that's fine. I don't want to be associated with people that judge me for being that way. And with that, I'm complete.
Josh, again, I'm going to try this, and you may think this is a baiting question. It may be, okay? So you feel free to not answer it if you like. But when I asked you whether what you wanted to do was come here and apologize to Barry and not to Kayla, I felt that that was not treating Kayla equally. Barry was upset. Kayla was upset. You apologized to Barry. You didn't have anything to say about how you made Kayla upset. I was also upset, and you didn't apologize to me about being upset. You apologized to Barry. So to me, that sounds like that was not being treated equally. Over.
Yeah, so I just want to say that what triggered me about the word, the triggering, it's just that I'm looking for a more precise word so that people won't get triggered. So yesterday, Kayla shared a story, and a woman had asked her a question that started with, let me get the exact words. She started with, could you tell me? And I said, and that question bothered Kayla in a certain way. She didn't respond that way, but she shared with us that internally, could you tell me, had been bothersome to her. And I said to her, if she would have said, do you know? Would you have still felt the same? And she said, no, that would have been better. So I'm sharing that just to say that just changing something so simple from could you to do you makes a difference. So when I bring up a word like equal, it's not that I have any attachment to the word, it's that I can foresee how other people how it could lead to a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. So it's not about trying to be, oh, this is the word I want because I think, I want it. It's this is the word I think will be best, and I'm sharing it in the moment so that we could pay attention in the moment. Over.
Glenn has his finger up.
Yeah, yeah. I really like that because that reminds me of exactly this point that some words have these associations. So when they're used, it's not just how they see it or how I see it, but there's also maybe a third person and how they see it. And I really thought this question a more precise word. I've given this some thought. I think I have a suggestion. It's very simple. Using the name of the person. So if I refer to Joshua, the most precise word is Joshua. And we could actually keep it that simple, potentially. And then at the same time, we could refer in general to groups, but we don't need to identify a specific person with a group. If they have a name, we can actually use that name. So that could be a suggestion for a more precise word.
Barry.
One of my favorite authors, the late Raymond Smullyan, professor of logic and philosophy. I loved his writings. And in one of his pieces, he quotes a Zen philosopher, Sang, hard to pronounce his name. But in a dialogue where people are arguing, he closes with this suggestion. It might be helpful to recall what was once said in the writings of this great Zen poet. And here's the material. If you want to get to the plain truth, be not concerned with right and wrong. The conflict between right and wrong is the sickness of the mind. It's a good piece of wisdom from a Zen poet from centuries ago. So they're arguing over I'm right and you're wrong, and vice versa. I think that's a losing practice. One that I would like to deprecate. I see Josh put his hands up.
And that's my point is the game of languaging. That's what I mean, Sam, when I say you're playing a game, it's a language game. And I've been with philosophers. I've done these language mimetic logic games. Go ahead, say something if you want to say it.
When I say someone was not given a chance to speak, that's not playing a philosophy game. Kayla was not given a chance to speak. So don't tell me I'm playing a game about philosophy. I was trying to give Kayla a chance to speak. You are still not able to acknowledge that that's what happened. You're trying to make it about a philosophy game. That's not what happened.
Can I speak now? I'm a little concerned I'm going to get interrupted, but I'm asking you, Sam, are you in a space where you can hear me?
So,
Okay. Not only do I see you doing that, I saw you standing up for a woman and coming to her honor and defense and saying, hey, you let Kayla speak. How dare you interrupt her? But I find that to be chastising and to be mansplaining and to be doing the exact same thing that you're trying to defend her from is what you were doing in that moment. And I take offense to that.
okay, I'm going to call bullshit on that also. I say that is deep bullshit, Jack. Not Jack, sorry, Josh.
That's And if I say what I'm feeling and from my heart and you call me bullshit, I don't feel safe with that.
Because I actually think that you've been disingenuous often in this conversation and in previous conversations, okay? And you're the one playing games, Josh, okay? I really don't see that bringing up issues of philosophy has anything to do with giving someone a chance to speak. Okay, you're trying to derail the conversation, and that's what is disingenuous to me.
I just saw what Barry put in the chat. I already apologized to you, Barry. I am not apologizing to you, Sam, and I'm going to leave. And thank you for 5 years of great conversation.
I am very, very open to opinions from Stacy, Glenn, Kayla, Barry, others, whom I still believe are engaging in good faith. In my opinion, Josh is not engaging in good faith. So that's why I had to say it didn't land well with me what he was trying to say, both in the moment and today. And
So,
I'm very willing to be sorry.
no, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
I'm saying I'm very honestly very willing to engage in retrospectives on my behavior. I know it's not perfect, but to me, it has been unfruitful with Josh. Over.
So before Josh left, I was ready to come on just to say that I had to leave. And I was going to type into the chat to Barry that if he started feeling uncomfortable, he should just leave. But then Josh left, so it wasn't necessary. What I will say, because I hear where you're coming from, Sam, I absolutely do. And what I will say is with Joshua, I will play a word game and get him on the record for a word because I have often found him to be disingenuous and to engage in stories that he creates. This is just my opinion, I understand that, but to engage in stories that he creates in the moment to paint a better picture of his own behavior that's already come out. So I did want to ask him specifically, and I did, were you really crying or were you pretending to be crying? Because certain people in the call thought he was pretending and doing it purposely. I did not, but I wanted to be sure. So now, when he gives an answer, he's on the record for saying that he really was upset. Now, the fact that he was upset, I could definitely feel more compassion for him. Not necessary. I would not have that discussion with him, with you in the room, for example. And that's nothing bad about you. But like he said, it's not a safe place. And if somebody is going to try and access why they had an emotional reaction to something, the first rule is to make them feel safe. So I guess I'm saying this not just to go on the record, but I also want to support you a little bit because I know I'm often very hard on you. I want to support you in recognizing that whatever behavior is coming out now is based on a past history of dealings with this person. Because in many ways, I see, and again, just my personal opinion, that some of the critiques that I would have made about you, let's say, that you've gotten better at those things. So if they're coming out now, it's because of the relationship between you and Josh, which is also to say that I can understand why Josh may feel less safe with you because of his history. But anyway, just again, the most important piece of what I'm saying is sometimes he comes off as inauthentic. And that's why I think some of us want to get him on the record saying something, because as we know with politics and with Trump, it is very frustrating to have discussions with people who keep changing the facts. And we need to just at least be able to agree on what actually happened before we go further. So have
And
a great discussion. I have like 5 minutes. I'm just getting dressed, but I'll be dropping off. Thank you.
okay. Hey, Stacy, just one more thing before you go.
Sure.
I think the feel of the conversation yesterday is very different than the
Oh,
feel of the conversation today. Yesterday, I thought we really actually hit some deep, meaningful moments.
absolutely.
And I don't feel that we got that today. And I have to admit, okay, when Kayla said she was crying, she felt so deeply. And within a second, Josh said, I'm over here crying too. It just sounded very disingenuous to me. In fact, I said bullshit at that point. Okay. It was so artificial that to me, it was just grabbing the attention from what Kayla was trying to say and making Kayla feel immediately unsafe. That he made it about him and that he was crying. He didn't acknowledge that Kayla was feeling deeply.
And that's the piece that I agree with, that he made it about him. I'm not going to say whether he really felt like crying or didn't feel like crying, because that I'll take him at his word. But it did take the attention away, and that was the issue that I had.
Yes, that was the issue I had as well.
I felt that when I listened to you, it occurred to me that because I heard the when you spoke for an hour afterwards, and it felt like you both made your point very, very clear and repeated. It just sounded like you just made your points very, very clear. At the same time, the conversation was about something that had been said before by someone else and why this was not good. And I just wonder, is there something about that dynamic itself of sort of having the focus on the mistakes of the past? Because I also see that as one of the most typical patterns in the so-called political discussion, that there is an enormous emphasis on wrongs that happened in the past and why I felt wronged, and it seems that in that sense it's completely real that they feel wronged. But is there kind of a way out of that, or where you start looking forward, or is there something about this pattern of looking back towards what was wrong that somehow leads to this endless deliberation that you sort of never can get out of? Because now I sort of heard two of you go kind of back again to the same things you said earlier. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but Sam.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got it completely, but it seems to me that um, you find it somewhat troublesome or maybe unproductive to be reflecting what was done wrong. And if I misinterpreted that, then correct me. But to me, nothing can move forward unless we acknowledge what happened. And the acknowledgement of what happened was what Kayla was trying to get at. That was the piece she wanted to elicit from Josh and Barry. And that was the piece she was unable to do, in my opinion. So to move forward, you need to move forward from some place, right? You need to know where you are before you know where to set your sails or set your rudder. If you don't know where you are, it doesn't matter really. Okay, you'll get someplace, but you're not going to have any real probability of getting there. So I think memory
I
serves a
understand.
purpose.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I wonder, why do we hear so little talk in the political conversation about what we could do?
You mean in the United States?
That too, and also, what could we do? Why is that question being completely ignored?
I don't think it's being completely ignored. But what we're trying to do, at least in the United States, if we take this conversation there, okay, is that there's so much intentional misinformation and alternate facts that is a horrible morass to counter and to correct. And it's a very effective technique that they do that because it takes 10 times more energy and effort to correct a lie than it does to say a lie, maybe 100 times. Okay. So misinformation used as a weapon is very effective. But until people get to the truth, they don't know how bad things are and they don't know what their options are. And they can't even collaborate together to figure out what problems to solve and what direction to move into or who's actually aligned in their thinking. That's why the tactic of fascists and dictators is misinformation. One of my jobs, just to give you a piece of trivia, in 1997 or 1998, I was working on a classified project. On that classified project, we were taking pictures. I'm not going to tell you where those pictures came from. And we're looking at the pictures and drawing where the roads were and where the railroads were. Because in that country, maps were classified information. The citizenry was not allowed to have maps. If you were caught with a map in your possession, you were jailed, you were arrested in that particular country. So one of my projects was to create a map system where before that it didn't exist, for public use. So these governments that want to have absolute autocracy and control the public's opinions, they make sure they can because the public is, let's say, devoid of truth. The truth is withheld from the citizenry. And whether it's through blockchain or whether it's through decentralized servers or whether it's through any other technology or quantum machines or whatever, we need to have a foundation that actually can be a repository of truth, because that's what's being eradicated. You know what the Trump administration is doing? They're telling people to delete databases of drug trials, scientific studies, papers, collected evidence. They're actually mandating that these databases and records and repositories be destroyed. It's as bad as the Library of Alexandria disaster, in my opinion. So that's why we can't really move forward, in my opinion, Glenn, because so much of reality is being distorted by the powers that be. If we want to take it there, over.
Okay, just see what I heard there. So the problem is that we're being bombarded with misinformation, with noise. This relates to the point I was speaking about earlier, like our relationship with the information technology, the patterns, the information itself, the flow of the information. It seems we're being overwhelmed by a flow of a certain kind of information that just puts people up against one another, and it's stories of bad things that have happened that only selectively takes it out, and then some people are made to look like demons, so we need to fight against those people. And then this sort of a dynamic is what I'm seeing, and it's massive amounts of misinformation, but it's even more than that. It seems to be like this entire ecology of stuff that just goes in its own kind of a wheel, and where you have many of these mimetic structures that may evolve by themselves. And I'm not even sure if a lot of this information or misinformation is being consciously planted by anyone in particular. They could be emergent phenomena, and they could be emergent mimetic parasites that just feed on our attention. And that's really what I see happening. So how can we get out of this? I mean, it seems we have to figure out some kind of way to relate with these information structures consciously, and be able to have high quality information that's based on real truth, and that truth could even be something like the facts of my immediate situation. That's a whole question. Maybe blockchain could be useful, but maybe there could be even a more direct approach in terms of how we think. So, like, this is the stuff I'm constantly thinking about, and the question of how do large language models fit into this? How do we speak with these systems? What kind of questions do we ask? What kind of possibilities emerge? That seems to be like part of the, the thing that could get us out of this. But I'm just seeing people look at their phones, and especially those who are politically engaged, I think they're getting so bad information, and they're getting very different information, and it's not information that's even oriented towards making things better. I really see that these misinformation patterns have a tendency to continuously point blame to others based on terrible things that happened in the past. And it never seems to be an opening for actually looking at the situation now and what is possible now. So yeah, go for it.
Let me try something on you, Glenn, and Barry, jump in if you feel like it, okay? I think that what happened with AI is a very good example of what I'm about to talk about. The stuff in neural nets was at least posited, I believe, in the 70s, if not earlier, okay? So this stuff has been going on for like 50 years. It's been hard to actually get right because we're tweaking with the coefficients. We're trying to figure out, the weightings. We're trying to get machines powerful enough to handle enough data that the vector databases could actually be very good. So now all of a sudden people say, oh, wow, geez, the last 3 years, it's amazing what AI has done. No, it's not 3 years. It's 5 decades worth of work that has only recently, been useful enough to make public. So I think that the kind of stuff that we're asking here is part of that early 47 years, probably 47 centuries of ruminating about these questions. And at some point, someone's going to get, that little knee in the curve. And then the returns will start, hitting some kind of exponential return. That is my belief, because that's the way technology seems to work throughout all of history. And I think social technology is a technology. So I think that asking questions like this, and I don't think we're the only ones. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of little groups like this, having conversations on patios, coffee shops, tea houses, whatever, okay? Asking these very same questions. And at some point, someone will have an insight. And that insight, if effective, will spread. Now, what I was trying to offer is for each of us to figure out what good means. To me, that's a good start. What does good mean? And to repeatedly, look at what we've done and say, did I do good? Or do I now have a better understanding of what good means? And if we can get into one-on-one conversations like that, or one-on-two conversations of that, then over time, my notion of good will evolve and mature. When I'm young and starting out, what does good mean? Well, it could mean do unto others as you would have others do unto you. That's a good place to start. But I think it doesn't capture many other nuances of good. I mean, there's an alternate to that one, by the way, right? Which is do unto others the way they want to be done unto. Not the way I want to be done unto, right? So there's a few twists on all of this, and there's lessons learned, and what good means to someone is very different depending on how they grew up. There's one saying which I like a lot, which is, "What is happiness? It's the absence of searching for happiness. Because if you're searching for happiness, you feel you need something that you don't have. So, is that part of the good? To me, being happy is not the purpose of life. But it's written into the United States Constitution. So it's kind of like a given. Well, so we have to work with it. I accept it. It's not perfect, but it's a good starting point. So each of us, in my opinion, should ask ourselves regularly, what does good mean to me? Does it include honesty? Does it include authenticity? Does it include relationship? Does it include charity? Does it include contribution? Does it include knowledge? Does it include truth? Does it include health? You know, all of these questions, everybody will answer them differently. But if we have these conversations and I can learn something from your notion of good that I could then incorporate into myself, and hopefully this can scale, then we can over time see who aligns with us. And I think that's a good way to start. I believe anybody who contributes to the most horrible of crimes is probably thinking in some way that they're doing good. But they're probably not asking themselves to reevaluate that on a regular basis. That's what I would like to see. Over.
It seems to me that many of those who do terrible things feel they're doing something good in the sense that they're fighting against an injustice. And they feel they have to do it. Seems to be one of the patterns of those stories. This question, what is good to me? That's a great question. If I think what would be good for me, like really good, it would have to be to exist in a situation where all people are more or less happy in the sense of it, in the sense of a high degree of working together. There's a creativity, there's a natural learning, there's a natural community, there's space, there's personal space, there's collective spaces. It would have to be a harmony with nature. I was out in nature yesterday and I just saw this area that had been undisturbed for a long time because it's a forest area where they haven't done anything, and you see this unbelievable degree of harmony and integration. For example, around this what's it called? This area where you have water, a swamp, and the trees were just standing around in a ring. And I looked at the geometry of the trees and how they expressed harmonious coexistence patterns, I guess you could say. And this was just a very simple example that's 5 minutes away from my door of an incredibly advanced system that's working with an unbelievable degree of harmony on multiple levels. So why wouldn't we, for example, have society that's also organized around those kinds of principles? Then we can even ask questions about geometry. Why do we have all our houses as boxes? Why don't we have them as circular towers where you can just build like this and branch out the way natural structures have done for billions of years? There's so many strange questions about how we as humans have organized this this way of doing society. So one version of what is good could simply be that it's multi-level system harmony that's actually intelligent. Then you come into this question of what would be a higher intelligence and even super intelligence. And that would obviously have to be a synergy between humans, nature, AI, language, that there was a relatively synergistic scenario. Doesn't have to be a perfect scenario. It can be all kinds of weird stuff happening. And I think you can argue that even in the current situation, there is a lot of really great things happening that we don't speak about, that happens in other timelines, even socially, so that there are things that keep society going. Um, yeah, yeah, go for it, Sam.
Again, Barry, I'm going to say, say what you want at any time, okay? Because I know you've been standing by. But
It's in the chat.
okay,
I said it years ago. It's in the chat.
okay. But I'm going to respond to you, Glenn, because I like what you said, because it has a very deep implication to me. If we do take a very multi-level or whatever word you use, let's say cross-discipline, and let's say multi-scale view of what happens, then it's interesting that if we are knowledgeable about the effects and the dynamics of each of those levels, then we can look at what that level would indicate if it were healthy, or what that level would indicate if it were unhealthy. And the deeper we probe into all of these levels, and once again, we could possibly use the word subsystem or system, then it's clear to me that the more we understand the workings of those levels or systems or subsystems, the better we are able to look at the key metrics of them, whether it's oxygen production or whether it's carbon dioxide, consumption, or whether it's human health, or whether it's longevity, or whether it's food distribution, or whether it's water quality. The more we know about each of those systems, the more we can tell whether it's healthy or not for the planet as a whole, or even for some subset of it, like the human race. Okay. So that to me is why science is so crucial, because science is one way of listening to the world, listening to the universe, and understanding how it works, understanding its heartbeat, its water beat, its air beat, its leaf beat, its root beat. And that's why science is so crucial, because if you don't pay attention to those things and you just put your faith in, oh, God will provide, or, Allah will provide, or let me just blow this up and I'll go and have 72 virgins to deflower, in heaven. If you just believe simple, idiotic beliefs like that, then you're not really honoring nature, honoring the world. Science is the best way of honoring nature and honoring the world, because we now pay attention to it and we're trying to understand how it works. Okay. And in some ways, that understanding could then help us add more health to each of these subsystems, the ecology and the human race and other animal species and other plant species. So I love your description of that, because it has an immediate implication in paying attention, honoring, and indeed listening and learning from it, which is how I view science, the path to truth. Over.
I love that you mentioned science. Here's my question. Do we actually have science? Does real science actually exist? As far as I can tell, it doesn't.
Indubitably, it exists, okay? Because we have new insights now that would not be possible without real science. Now, does bad science exist? Absolutely. But we have to be able to learn to tell the difference. For example, real science, if it were not possible, would not have produced a Higgs boson result a dozen years ago, or however long that was. Okay. Real science, if it didn't exist, would not have explained oxygen versus phlogiston, one of Barry's favorite examples. So yes, real science exists. But can it be falsified? Can it be Vulnerable to corruption? Absolutely. It's a human endeavor. So, like all human endeavors, it's vulnerable to all these bad practices. That's why it's so precious, though. It's a proven path to truth that some will either unwillingly or worse, intentionally derail and corrupt because it threatens their power. It threatens their grasp of power. And by that I mean organized religion and other cult-like phenomena. But science, does it exist? True science? My answer is indubitably yes.
Okay. Let me follow up on that because I think this is a very interesting question. It does seem that, yes, science, of course, there's something real that exists because some things have happened, and we call. It seems to me that it exists in small pockets here and there. It's not one science; it's multiple sciences that tend to be specialized on a very narrow field. But science as an idea, it seems to me, is something far greater than anything we've seen. It's an idea of being able for humans to openly share observations with very accurate measurements of exactly what is happening in the world empirically, right down to the bare facts, to see it, hear it, and then record it, and then be able to share, have these observations able to be reviewed, and then be able to do experiments and share what happens in the experiments, maybe also do predictions for the next experiments, and then theories being built around this to create better predictions. Or prediction is something that can be a test for the theories, so that this is falsifiability, right? So there's all of this, and then there's also the open dialogue, and this is the idea of peer review, where you have others that can review what is being shared, and potentially it can be reviewed from multiple angles. And you also have professional scientists, in the sense that they really work on this full time as their occupation. And as far as I can tell, what we currently have in the world is not that. And the main problem is that the incentives are not primarily search for truth. The incentives of what you could call organized science seems to have become deeply immersed with commercial interests and power struggles, politics, and also personal prestige. So the professors in a given field tend to sort of be a clique, and they have their own language, and you're not supposed to ask too many questions. You're allowed to ask questions within a certain range, but if you get out of that, you're actually risking being dismissed and frozen out, actually. And then in addition to that, there's question of whether maybe all of these sciences are actually operating on a paradigm with a certain separation between the inner and the outer, a certain duality, a duality between theoretical and physical and many other things, and even a sense that the world is dead instead of that everything is alive. And this goes back to criticisms from people like Rupert Sheldrake when he says that there's many of these assumptions in what you could call organized science, and where maybe the reason why those assumptions are there is because this so-called organized science is being governed by this political machine, and therefore it's being used for those kind of exploitative purposes. And therefore, if you really look at it as a whole, it isn't scientific, and it's and there's also the question of patents of the so-called intellectual property, which also means that in many cases the real data isn't actually being shared openly. So, I mean, I'm mentioning many things here, but I mean, I'm sure you've all heard a lot about this before. But I really have a general impression that science, in the full sense of the word, in the sense of what it really could be, is a beautiful idea that's inspired people. We've seen it in specialized pockets here and there, but it really seems like something that we haven't seen yet in the world, and that we could see, and it's really worth looking into. Yeah, finished.
Glenn, as I said, I agree with what you've described with many of the ways science is abused because it needs funding and is corrupted because politicians have to approve that funding. I agree with you. But there's a big, big world out there where each of us, whether it's in our gardens or in our own garages or in our own little, virtual workshop, are practicing science ourselves, the true principles. Let's try this. Let's see if it works. Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let me try this hypothesis. Oh, that seems to work better. So in a microcosm, each of us could possibly be practicing the scientific method. And I think many of us are. And in that way, uncorrupted by funds, uncorrupted by politicians, it is potentially pure science. And I think there's a big part of that that isn't getting published in technical journals or, approved by the professors that you say have their own little cliquish fiefdoms and, operate in their own language. But there's a way to think. There's a way to actually think and, derive new conclusions, new insights that all of us, if we are properly trained and educated, or at least exposed to those things with a strong personal interest, each of us could practice those principles. And I think that is unappreciated, or at least from what I heard you say, that aspect of it was unappreciated. And I think I have hope for that. Indeed, that's the only hope if we have governments that are corrupt. Over.
I think the most significant departure from the protocols of the scientific method is the failure to falsify the alternative hypotheses, either the null hypothesis or the current hypothesis, the failure to rigorously, consciously attempt to falsify hypotheses is the biggest shortcoming, failure in terms of adhering to the protocols of the scientific method.
But isn't that like core to the whole method?
It is. That's why it's the biggest shortcoming, the failure to rule out, to conclusively falsify the various alternative hypotheses, including the pat one and the null one. I see that all the time.
And in fact, I think the bigger the project, the more funding it needs, the more money it needs, the harder it is to falsify, because the harder it is to replicate that experiment.
You got a lot invested in it. You got a sunk cost in the working hypothesis, and if you falsify it, you're out of work. So yeah, there are urges to to look the other way.
Oh, not just that. If you have $25 million grant and you come up with a hypothesis, then for me to really, employ proper science, I'd have to get 25 or $30 million to reproduce your results.
Or just to show that it makes a prediction. The theory that you're proposing makes a prediction which is bogus, which is patently bogus. That's the easiest way. That's
okay. Yeah. Right. You're right. All I'm saying is, the bigger the project, the more at stake, to falsify these things, as you say, and harder for someone else to reproduce that very work.
But I think that's a commonplace departure from scientific thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Hey,
Adopting and going with a, a working hypothesis that you haven't attempted to falsify, or you haven't attempted to falsify the alternatives.
right. I like this. Okay, but may I change topic slightly because I know we're coming to the top of the hour. Okay, Glenn, you were one of the very first to view the video of last Saturday and issue your opinion on it, which I respect. Okay, you have some somewhat critical things of me, which I did not take offensively at all. I did not take offense to any of that because I felt that there were other aspects of it that you would soon discover for yourself. And indeed, you did go back and review the recording again and issue a somewhat different opinion. Now, I'm not absolving myself of any bad behavior. I know that I'm capable of losing my temper, and with someone that has seen a repeated history of events, I have probably a shorter fuse than others might in a similar situation. So I respect you going back, watching it not just once but twice, and then coming here to actually engage in this conversation. So I really appreciate the way you comported yourself here and the way you wanted to add to this conversation. Over.
Yeah, yes, thank you. I mean, it's a very big topic, and felt a little strange. Yeah, I did have a sort of a bit of a reaction the first thing I said, because it was the second time I listened to a clip when both of you were really shouting at each other, um, and at the same time, it feels connected to this larger theme that we touched on with identity, and especially this with how we see ourselves and others and define it, which again ties in with these larger things we've touched on today. So it's a very very complex topic, but I do hope that I can be a little bit more participating in things moving onward, even though it's just been difficult for me to participate in meetings. But I mean, I do find it very, very, very stimulating, that especially when we can really dig a little deeper into it, well, like we did today.
I appreciate
Yeah.
it. And to the extent that you're able to participate, that will be appreciated as well. One of the things that I several years ago came to as not a conclusion, a corollary, let's say, to collaborology, is for the world to move, it's not necessary to collaborate with everyone. I have to remind myself all the time. But it's very good to find the right people to collaborate with. And that's what the COI and my question, what does good mean to you? That's what it's intended to seed. That would, I think, be my closing statement. Any last closing statements from the two of you?
I'd just like to underscore the last thing I said, that of all the cases where there's a failure to falsify one of the working hypotheses on the table, probably the single most commonplace example is when adopting a theory of mind of a correspondent. It's very commonplace to adopt an incorrect theory of mind and act as if it was a valid hypothesis as to the mindset of somebody else, and not to bother to try to falsify it conclusively before adopting it. That's been a big bugaboo that I've run into pretty much my whole adult life.
Yeah, I don't believe I'm perfect there, but each of us has to take a practical shortcut every time. And sometimes those are wrong.
Well,
But most of the time, if you're a reasonable person, most of the times they're workable.
Yeah, I have nothing more to say on that. I've said what I had to say, and I'm not going to repeat it.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just finish off with a few thoughts before going off. Few things. One thing that came to my mind when you said this about science was the difference between institutional science within the current paradigm. You could argue probably it's not very scientific, and what you more could call citizen science, which is something we can do in our everyday lives. And this is where it seems to me there's real opportunity to build on that foundation if we could establish something where that knowledge of very different people from their lives could be brought together, and then using the power of this information technology and the power of language models to act as an interface, as intermediaries, as helpers, as very intelligent systems that could facilitate a dialogue between the many experiences that are shared between people, and be able to see various patterns. And when it comes to, for example, generating hypotheses, that could be one field where they could be very useful if you ask them the right way. Another could be to see patterns across various fields of life. For example, patterns about what is good, what is the good life for me, the good life for other people. And I've had a lot of conversations with the large language models about this topic, and there's certain themes that seem to come up again and again and again and again, and it has to do with interconnection. Is a word that comes up a lot. There's a sense of being together. There's a mindset of unity. There's a creativity. There's an openness. There's a playfulness, and there's certain larger patterns that seem to go together with what you could call the good life for humans that can be investigated a lot more rigorously now because we have these tools, and that's also something I see a lot of potential for, and the potential also for creating even virtual characters that can have Socratic and Bohemian dialogues and can actually do it to such a degree that it can inspire us. And this I have already done a lot, and I suspect many others have done too. And it already works fantastically well. And it creates examples of possible ways of thinking together, of sharing together, sharing experiences together, which could really adopt the scientific method in its right way, in a way that also enhances our lives. And that is really something that I see a lot of potential for. So if you want to have a deep dive into that topic at some time, I would really love to go with that.
Glenn, in fact, as you were speaking, I was thinking, yes, let's definitely have you spend the session and show us what you're doing on that front. I think that would be fabulous.
Yeah, that would
So
be awesome. I'm sure
let me
many of
know.
the rest of you have been doing interesting stuff too, so we could probably share a lot.
Good. Anyway, let me know when you'd like to do that and we'll get it on. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that
All
would
right.
be great.
Thanks, Glenn, for coming. Thanks, Barry, for being the stalwart participant and voice of sanity at times, and the useful, let's say, uh, sounding board at others. Okay. So, till next time. Thank you.